I'm into soil health and regenerative agriculture. So I don't purchase any form of commercialized fertilizers, pesticides, or fungicides to grow my food. I actually create all the inputs for my quarter-acre market garden on my property. And some of the things that we do and that we're known for is called worm castings. Is anybody familiar with worm castings? Okay, so my dad got me into growing worms, and this is actually a worm bin. It's a miniaturized worm form. Mm-hmm. So when you look at it, it looks like dirt. Mm-hmm. None of this is dirt. This is actually peat moss, rabbit manure, and a little bit of horse manure mixed in with paper and cardboard and apples. And what's in here are a bunch of beautiful red wigglers. Mm-hmm. Now when they eat, they poop. And when they poop, they fat. And when they poop, I actually harvest that poop and I sell it. And these are the little guys.
And notice there's no odor.
There's no odor at all.
Absolutely no odor.
And there's actually apples and there are some eggshells in here. But you can see, like, I'm looking for the apple. I bury everything in here for them. But there's an eggshell. They'll just eat all of this down, poop it back out. And it's their poop that I'm looking for. Well, there is an apple in here.
How can you
Here it
tell
is.
what's the poop?
How do you do it?
The
How
black
do you tell?
stuff.
Yeah, so I run it through a screen and anything, and it takes 3 months for them to eat all of this, including the cardboard on top. Once everything in there is gone.
Oh my
There's no paper, there's no apple core, there's no eggshells left, no cardboard. Once all of that's gone, it's ready to be run.
Now, I do mine different. I use leaves, grass, shredded paper, and table scraps. That's why we started. My granddaughter in college wanted to save the world. So she said, what can we do? I said, get rid of the garbage. So we started that worm farm strictly to keep paper and stuff out of the landfill. At one time, we were going through big black bags, 2 or 3 papers a month.
Shredded paper.
Yeah, shredded paper. Not going to the landfill, it was going in here. Mm-hmm. And that was going in the garden.
So I have
It's a
zero
win-win.
food waste, zero paper waste on my farm.
Wow.
No paper ever goes in the trash. Absolutely nothing. Nothing from paper towel rolls to paper like up here. Any of that could be. So
There's no
this
odor.
is actually
There's absolutely
worm
no
castings.
odor at all.
So that
If you
is their poop.
smell
It
it,
has
it's
no
absolutely
odor,
no
like
odor.
powder, and actually feeds your plants.
And I mean, that's food scraps, like you said, all that.
But no meat, no.
Oh, no ma'am.
No ma'am, no meats, no dairies, no citrus.
Okay, now whenever you throw an apple in there, do you cut it in half or make a couple pieces? Or
You
just
can,
throw a
yes
whole
ma'am. I
apple in there?
actually was making my own homemade apple cider vinegar, and I had the cores left, and that's what that is. So you can pretty much put anything in here that you have left over, like sitting at this table, any of the salad that's left over could be easily just dropped in here.
Even if
And
it
that-
has a salad dressing on it?
As long as it's not like a ton of salad dressing. You don't want to, I tell people, think of it as they're soft-bodied worms. So I think of them as livestock. So I don't want to put anything on their skin that might burn them. Whereas a ranch dressing wouldn't cause a problem, but it might cause an odor. A vinaigrette could possibly burn them. So I'm very cautious about what I put in here, and I think of it like that. If you drink coffee, every morning when you're done with your coffee grounds, you move this and dump it right in there and cover it back up. They'll eat them all within a day. They love coffee grounds. Love them. And it helps to add nitrogen to this. So the thing about worm castings that makes them so amazing is the fact that this has fungi and the good bacteria that your soil needs to be soil. There's dirt everywhere, but there's very little soil left in the world. And the problem is that we don't feed soil. So these guys are God's tillers of the earth. So I don't till. I have a 1/4 acre on hard packed clay that I have been growing on for 2 years. It's never been tilled. It's never had a commercial fertilizer or a fungicide or a pesticide put on it. And I grow thousands of pounds of dirt. When we started, you couldn't put a shovel in that soil. It was so hard. you can now walk out there and sink your hands into it. And what I started with was worm castings and compost that we made on our farm. And keeping the soil covered.
How
many
many
acres
how
is-
long of a period of time would it take you to get that much?
This much? Okay, so this entire thing will be worm castings in about 2 months from now.
It's gonna be filled.
Well, it'll be a little higher than what's. They'll eat everything in here, and then what's left is their worm castings.
Yeah,
So what do? You take them out and then
You
put
take
them
them
in
out and
another-
move. You take them out and reset the bin, put them back in, and then you can use this for your potted plants, for your roses. We make worm tea. And worm tea is very easy to make. You could take a cup of this, put it into a knee-high, set it in a 5-gallon bucket with water, put you some molasses or even sugar, stir it every time you pass it for about 2 days, and then pour that in a sprayer.
What are you referring to, a knee high?
Like a stocking.
Oh, okay.
And that way you don't clog your sprayer up when you pour it in there.
I got you, okay.
And and that's how you make worm tea. And it will feed your plants. It also protects them from pests. It covers the scent of the plant. So pests can't
Let
find
me
them.
elaborate on her question. You can continue to put like shredded paper or your table scraps, you can keep adding. And the only time you stop adding the food if you smell an odor. Then you got too much food. You're starting to sour. Just stop feeding them. They'll eat it and go right back to feeding them.
Yeah.
Oh.
And they'll just keep right on coming up.
These
You-
guys,
You could literally fill this thing up.
and they would eat all of it
And
and
it's
continue to
extremely
food.
heavy.
Yeah.
Worm castings absorbs water and it's extremely
Right.
heavy.
I was going to tell you guys that. So I do a type of farming where I don't use a lot of water. My garden only gets watered every 3rd day if it hasn't rained in the heat. So last year on my property, my temperature gauge said 117 degrees. That was my straight temperature, and it had not rained in a month. Yet if you walked in my garden, and I have videos of it on our YouTube channel, it looked like an oasis. And the difference was that around every one of my plants was this, around the root zones of my plants. And then on top of that was hay and leaves, anything I could get to keep my soil covered. And so like my dad said, this is very absorbent. If right now I put this down and poured a cup of water and left it for about an hour and come back, it would look like it was dry. It would just suck it up, just pull it in. And that's what makes worm casting so good for clay soil and potted plants, is you don't have to continually water because it holds the water and it will slow release.
I think I'd have to think twice about drinking worm tea.
Oh yeah, no, you don't want to do that. It is pretty bitter, but I always tell everybody,
That is crazy.
it is. The good thing about having these kind of products around your house is your great-grandchildren and your
No, wait,
grandchildren,
I'm sorry.
it's not
That was a
poisonous.
joke. Worm tea, you pour on your plant roots. You don't drink it.
Yeah, but if your grandkids picked it up and drank it, it would
I
hurt.
think it just goes on
I
what you
said, I'd
said.
have to think
Yeah.
twice about that.
Yes, ma'am. But I've actually had a lot of people move to using things like the worm tea on their plants because they know that if their grandbaby or their child comes by, or even their dog comes by and licks that worm tea as you're spraying it on your plants, it's not going to hurt them. It's absolutely not going to hurt them at all. It's completely organic. So that's a good thing about using that. You want to explain your ginger, Daddy?
Yeah. I went out there today and just grabbed a bunch and jerked it out of the ground. It's still growing. Look at it.
My goodness.
Now show him your original piece that you started with.
Oh,
Now he
you
had
took
this
it
in a
off. Oh, there
pot,
it is. That's the original.
one tiny piece.
Now look, that's the original right there.
Now he grows the same way I do, worm castings, organic material, and rabbit manure is usually our big fertilizer that we use on the property. But I thought that was, God bless you, I thought that was so interesting that this one little piece of ginger grew this.
It's so rich. The
And y'all can
ground
pass
is-
that around, it
I've
smells
got a
phenomenal.
couple little pieces of ginger that I put in little 2 4-inch pots. I just put it in regular cotton soil, but so far it hasn't sprouted yet. It hasn't been planted that long. So did you just put it in cotton soil, or what'd you do to
Oh,
start it?
no, well, yes. I had a mixture of this
I got
and
some
my
worm
compost.
castings.
And that's what I did. I even put shredded paper sometimes in my containers. Not a lot, but I'll mix it in with the compost And it'll deteriorate over time. You know, it's a wood crop. And, but that ginger, I love it. I use ginger tea.
So this is the big baby story.
Well, back to the worms. So, do they reproduce?
Oh,
They do.
yeah, yes.
They- A lot. Like, how many do you kind of start off with?
This
in
has
a bucket?
about 250 worms in it, which is about a quarter pound. In 3 months, you're gonna have about 1,000 adult worms in here.
Oh my God.
So they are prolific breeders.
Where's my
Very,
glasses?
very prolific.
Yes, they like to make babies. Other than eating, I think that's all they do all day. I'm serious because
Eat and have babies.
you're looking for the eggs.
I'm looking for the eggs.
I did make sure that I added a few eggs in here. So I'm always real big about when I reset up a new bin, I don't just put adults, I put, and you gotta remember, I just put them all in here today, so the eggs are probably somewhere deep in there.
They in there.
So I always make sure to put eggs in here because each egg should have 3 to 5 babies in them.
And there's a bunch of them in there.
Yeah, and we were looking at my bins. I have 2 bins about the size of this table that I keep full of worms at all times. So I produce about 600 pounds of worm castings every 3 months. But then I have a 1/4 acre market garden. So when you're talking about a size that big and it's intensely grown, you know, I do a lot of interplanting. I do a lot of succession planting, and I plant as soon as the last frost is done, all the way up until the hardest frost hits. That's all summer. Right now, what we have growing is I have 2 types of kale, cabbage, greens, and carrots, along with shallots, onions, and garlic, all still growing and growing quite well this year.
Wow.
Yeah, even through these like little freezes where we're dropping down into the high 20s at night, everything's still going. My cabbage is absolutely phenomenal this year. So I was really excited. It's the first time I've done a winter garden, so excited about that. But
Wait, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the worm castings. Where do you keep them?
these, that's why I made it like this for you guys. So this is kind of something, it's a little piece of plastic, came in with the paper. My dad and I started doing several years ago. We make these for people. This, you can put it anywhere. You could slide this under your table. You
never
could
know
put
it's
it
there.
underneath your kitchen sink. It's small, you will never know it's here. Now, once you look in here and you'll know when your worms have tripled their size. You'll look, there'll be so many worms, you'll be like, oh my gosh. You can either make more of these or release some into your garden.
Oh.
Yeah, and that'll help. The thing about red wigglers, that is the breed of worm that you have in here. They are composting worms.
Not dirt worms.
They're not dirt worms. Now they are an earthworm, but they're not like the Canadian earthworm that can go up to 8 feet through your soil. These guys, if they go in the soil at all, will only go in about 1.5 inches.
And what are they called?
They're called red wigglers.
Where do you get them?
You can order them. That's how we started. My dad started with red wigglers about 6 years ago. He ordered his first 1,000. And from there, we have literally rebred probably millions of worms at this point.
Once they start, they're like rabbits, they start.
Yeah.
As long as they're happy.
As long as they're happy. And you'll know when they're not, because one day you'll open this up and you won't see a whole lot of movement. And you'll start to notice that the food doesn't like it's being eaten. At that point, you just you run the castings, or you remove the worms, dump this out in your garden, and just put fresh stuff back in here.
Now, one other point, red wigglers breathe through their skin. If they get dry, they're gonna die. So they can take up to 70-80% moisture, but that's got to stay moist. In other words, I'd rather have too much water than not enough.
Right, then not enough.
Did
And-
you add water to it?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. When I set it up today, I used a peat moss and a composted horse and rabbit manure. So what I did was, once I put the peat moss in here, I poured water. I set these on top. This is my moisture gauge. You see how dry it is? It needs to be moist, which tells me that the peat moss absorbed all the water, but there's not a whole lot of extra moisture left over. When you take the lid off, everything should be condensing in here. Should have water on the sides of it. The top of this should be nice and damp. Now, if it is too much, like if you pick it up and it's dripping, this is dripping water, then you have too much water. But if you pick it up and it's bone dry like this, you don't have enough.
So what you do if you got too much water?
You add more materials, like paper, you shred paper
You
and
don't
you
actually
just press it
sprinkle it
down.
with water or anything, you just add materials.
Yes, ma'am, to absorb the water back out. And then if you open it and these are bone dry like this, you just get a cup of water out of your thing and you just gently pour it on the cardboard. It'll absorb what it wants and the rest will run down into the bin. And then you check it in a couple of days. If the cardboard is bone dry again, your bin's too dry. So this is an easy way for somebody that's got a small worm form in their house to just check to see if your moisture is correct.
Now, are you talking dry, the bag peat moss?
Yes, ma'am. That's what I start with is a peat
Okay.
moss. Now you can use
And
the
what
coconut.
proportion?
The coconut.
I have some of both of them.
Yeah.